about how the budget was brought together for this year, and because not everybody can maybe make the meeting on Friday. So they're going to see a couple things come up. First, let's always talk about what God has already done and what this year's budget is based on. It's based on 2014. Our budget in 2014 was $183,000, or right about that. And I don't know, did everybody get a budget? Is it in your bulletins, right? So you might want to even pull that out. But last year, our budget, what we wanted to see God bring in to help us in every category in the budget is $183,000. The next little thing that's going to come up is what we actually spent, which is under what the budget was. We spent, as a congregation in 2014, $175,400. Okay, so we spent under the budget, and there's partly a reason for that, and that's because the next one shows what actually was given through our tithes and offerings. We're not a church that, when it comes to our general fund budget, is out trying to raise money in the community, through bazaars and strawberry festivals and fundraisers. We just don't do that. We don't believe that. We want God's people in the church to give on a regular basis to support our budget. So based on what was given through the offering plates in 2014, $169,600 came in, which is about $6,000 under what was spent. And some of you say, well, wait a second, how do you spend more than what comes in? Well, we do in our designated funds have what's called a miscellaneous account, which helps cover if there's a deficit. Not something that we like to rely on. We'd rather, have that money in the designated funds for other things, but it was there and it was utilized to help cover the deficit in 2014. So it was also $13,000. What came in was $13,000 under the budget of 183. So you can see that is kind of the foundation of what we have to look at as elders and trustees when we're looking at a new budget for 2015. What should we base it on? We have to be responsible and good stewards and make sure that we're not overextending. So what we did this year for the first time in a long time is we actually reduced the budget for this year. The 2015 budget, as you'll see, comes up. We have two parts to the budget. One's called our baseline budget, which is what's going to be kind of our working budget, and then we're going to have a vision budget, because if God blesses through your giving, we want to be able to do more. And every person who oversees a budget category in our budget wants to be able to do more. But what we did was, as you'll see, is pretty much put a baseline budget based on what was given in 2014. $169,900, which is a 7% decrease in what the budget was last year. So you say, well, what category is going to get cut? We have to make decisions. And we as elders made a really difficult decision to say, you know what, we're not going to cut one category. We're going to cut every category by 7%. And that means the number of things that are going to come up, all budget areas are affected, like evangelism, missions, which is really hard, was a really hard thing for us. We'll talk more about that in just a second. Education, worship, the pastor's salaries and professional expenses, administrative support, and facilities. Every area took a 7% cut. Now, I know for a lot of us, the hardest one was especially our missionaries. And, how do you cut the missionaries? They need our support. Well, what we've decided by faith is we're going to continue to give them what they're currently getting for the first at least 2, maybe 3 quarters. And if our giving is above budget, then great, we're going to continue that. But if it's not, we're going to have to let the missionaries know that in that final quarter, there's going to be a cut in their support. Now, what it'll do a couple things. Hopefully, it'll motivate all of us to make sure we're doing what we can to make sure that doesn't happen. And number 2, it's going to get our missionaries praying, isn't it, for us as a church. And they should be praying for us as a church and for all the churches that support them, that churches are growing and successful and certainly bringing in the amount of funds that they need. So that's our baseline budget, $169.90. But when we asked all the ministry leaders about what would you envision, what would you need to reach higher goals for your area of ministry? And so the vision budget actually came out to, and here comes the next little part, $217,400. You say, well, that's a lot more than what the baseline budget is. You're right, it is, because our folks, our ministry leaders, have a vision of what they want to see accomplished. And there's so many things that we'll talk about in just a second. But if you look at that with approximately, let's go to the next part. If we have approximately 100 giving units, okay, that means families or individuals who give regularly, who call this church their home. And you say, well, do we really have that many? And I can't be sure, probably Pat Wright or somebody could help me with this. But I think if you looked at our phone directory, or you looked at our congregation and said, how many people call First Baptist Church their home? And if they all came out on one Sunday, how many people do you think we would have here in both services? A lot, right? We average about 120, 130 people each Sunday, and that's not including the people that can't make it that particular week. I think we'd probably be 180, 190 people if everybody came on one given Sunday. And so I think that there probably are 100 what I call giving units, families, individuals who give regularly. And so what would it cost to make that budget, that $217,000 vision budget? It would mean $40 per week per giving unit. Okay, now we realize not everybody makes the same amount of money, as far as income coming in, and we'll talk about that in a second. Everybody just has to do their part. Not everybody's going to be giving $40 a week, obviously. But that's what it would cost, basically, just so you know, $40 a week per individual giving and giving unit to be able to reach the vision budget, which is not, too bad. So next slide. So what could be accomplished if we could reach the vision budget? Well, you all saw the out on the billboard. But what's that all about? What's the billboard all about? Well, the line it's about, one more click, it's about greater outreach to our community. It's about letting the people in our community, in this whole area, know that we're here and that we care and that we love them and that we would love for them to, come to know Christ and also become a part of our church family. So finding ways to continue to reach out in the evangelism and outreach budget is certainly something we would love to do more, but we can't if we don't make that budget. Next slide mentions, so what else could we do if we could accomplish that vision budget? We could expand our children and youth ministries. I mean, they already do a great job, but we could do more, and we certainly want to encourage them. Next slide talks about what could we do if we accomplish this vision budget? Well, we could give greater support, not just continue to give what we are giving to our missionaries, but we would love to give them a raise. How many times do missionaries get contacted by a church to say, oh, by the way, we'd like to give you a 10% raise this year? It's been a few years. And so we would love to increase our giving to our missionaries. And not only that, we've got 2 missionary families that we would love to take on in 2 other continents as missionaries that we would like to support as a church. So if we reached our vision budget, those things could all happen. What else could be accomplished if we could reach our vision budget? Many of you have a heart for our buildings and properties. That was the first, when we first purchased this church, I guess I was born that year, 1965, okay? That's what the church looked like when the Baptist church took over from the Wood Street church, from the Methodist church that was here. And not long after that, there was an addition put on to the youth center. If you notice on the left side, there's no upstairs where the youth center is now. Now there is, because of the addition that was put on. And then, of course, the new front foyer entrance, which is really a lovely addition, was also put on. But what could we do? We could improve, and we could expand our buildings and properties to continue to meet our needs. Next slide. So what could we accomplish if we could reach the vision budget? One of the things we could do is actually, have our pastors spend a little bit more time ministering. I say that because every pastor that we have is part-time. Bivocational. We all work other jobs, other areas of ministry, and we give as much as we can. But the fact is that we could do more if we could reach that vision budget. Some of us could work more hours. Next slide. I just want to talk for a second about giving, tithing. Now, some of you are familiar with the concept of tithing. It's all throughout the Old Testament, and it's also alluded to in the New Testament. I personally believe in tithing, which means giving 10% of what God blesses you with. And for me, that means the gross, not the net. But for me, 10% of what God has blessed me with is where I want to start in giving back to Him. And for me, that always starts with God's church, the local church that I'm a part of. And then beyond that, if God blesses, I love to give extra to missionaries. I love to give extra to Christian organizations like the America's Keziks and Choice One and a lot of those organizations. I love to give to extra as God blesses me. But I always start with the tithe and then go beyond that. So if you make $20,000 a year, what would the tithe be on an annual basis? $2,000. What would it cost weekly? $38. What did we say we needed for the vision budget? $40. Think about that. If you make $40,000, then the annual tithe would be $4,000, and it would be $77 weekly. And if you're blessed enough to make $60,000, it would be $6,115 weekly that you would give if you believe in the concept of tithing. Okay? And we just want to share with you that many of us do. So think about this. If 100 giving units averaged the middle, if 100 giving units in our church, made about $40,000, and let me just tell you, I did research this. The average income per family household in Morrisville, I researched it on the internet, $53,000 a year is the average of what comes in. So I'm going to say the 40,000, which is even lower. If 100 giving units in our church gave or tithed off of that, do you know how much our budget would be this year? It wouldn't be 169. It would be $400,000 would be our budget if every giving unit tithed based on $40,000 a year. And again, we know some of you don't make that much, and some of you make more than that. So we're all supposed to just do our part. That's why I think God gives us that principle of tithing, is so that, we all don't feel like, well, we all have to give the same amount. No, you don't. You have to give based on what God has blessed you with. So let's talk about, beyond the budget, other projects. And thank God for all the special projects that have been accomplished over the years. I don't know if I have all the dates correct, but think about this. The front foyer welcome center and addition was completed 2001. I'm pretty sure that date was completed. Another project was the purchase of the property. Remember the house burned down next door? In fact, we heard the sirens, while we were, I think, at church. And we purchased that property. I think in about 3 years, we were able to pay off a $165,000 mortgage for the property next door that we have a vision for. Missions trips. Some of you have been on missions trips over the years, and part of it was raising funds. We also helped hurricane victims down the shore, and we took special offerings to help even some that were overseas, the earthquake victims. Other things we've done as far as special projects. The new kitchen was completed in 2013, and the old kitchen was turned into a conference room / classroom in 2014, this past year. A couple other things. We want to expand the fellowship hall. That's our Christmas offering, and that's our project right now. Any extra giving that you give for building fund or for fellowship hall fund is going to help to expand the fellowship hall. We'll talk more about that in a second. And then also, we talked about building on the property next door, potentially a youth center that would have a gym and all kinds of opportunity. And we also have talked about a multi-site ministry in the future, the possibility of maybe God supplying another part of this area that doesn't have a good church where we could maybe expand to and meet a need. So those are some extra projects. Let's talk real quick about expanding the fellowship hall, though, because that's kind of what we're trying to work on this year. The total estimate that would have to be given to do the whole thing completely is $60,000. Okay, you say, well, that sounds like a lot. We raised that pretty quickly, actually, for the church kitchen. And so that's what we're working on now. The initial phase for us to be, even have just everything functioning, and it probably wouldn't even cost quite this much, is $40,000. But that would give us a lot towards the initial phase. And then what was collected through the Christmas offerings, and I don't know if Marty has an update, but I think if I remember correctly, it was about $5,000. And there are a few other designated accounts that could also bring that number up from people who have given special gifts and things of that nature. So, it's at least $5,000 at this point, but our goal is to really, before the summer, get that $40,000 so we can at least start working on expanding that fellowship hall back there, because you all know when we have things back there, we're cramped. And we have a beautiful kitchen. Now we need to make the fellowship hall, an expansion that could minister to more people. So hopefully by maybe May, we have the funds to be ready in the summer, because the summer is the best time to do that kind of project where it's not going to disrupt us as much as it would during the rest of the year. So that's kind of my goal, our goal we've talked about. So the last slide real quick is why give? Why give? Why should you give? It's not because we're twisting arms. In fact, one of the things we're always hesitant about is, and if you're new to our ministry and you're here today, are you one of those churches that all you do is talk about money? And the fact is, we really don't. In fact, a lot of people would say we don't talk about it enough. But we're very sensitive to that. And so if you're new to the ministry, this is not something we talk about every week. But this is a family talk, because we're part of a family, and families have to contribute together to reach the goals that God has laid on our hearts. But why give? Number one is because we're laying up treasures where? In heaven. You know what? When you meet the Lord face to face, when your time's up or you meet him in the air, he's not going to say, well, oh, I'm so impressed by what you still have in your bank account back on earth. You know, I'm so glad you had so much saved for retirement. I'm not saying it's wrong to save for retirement. You know, he's not going to say, oh, I'm really impressed by how big a house you have or how nice a car you have. When we see God in heaven, all the stuff we accumulate in this world is not going to matter worth anything. Worth anything. What is going to last is what we invest in God's kingdom. And God's kingdom is made up of people. And so when you're giving, you're investing in something that's eternal, not something that's temporal. It's laying up treasures in heaven, and there's eternal reward, the scriptures say. It's also, of course, about people, isn't it? The reason we give is because we want to see people become followers of Christ, not just people who check off their list, I prayed to receive Christ as Savior, though that's important, but become followers of Christ, disciples of Christ. And that's really part of our mission. And, of course, giving really is worship. It's a way that we show God that we love him and that we're giving it because we love him, not because we're twisting arms and saying, we're not looking at the envelopes and saying, how much did this family give this week? None of us as elders know any of that. There's only one person in the church that knows that, and she's very good at keeping her mouth shut, right, Pat? Yeah, so she doesn't tell us any of that. So we're not checking up. We're not like some churches that, you don't have a star by your name, or we won't do a funeral for your family if you don't, you find out that you're not giving. No. We are here to serve you as elders, as pastors, and that's the most important thing. And but we want to encourage you that giving is about your relationship with God, and it's a way to bring him worship and praise. It's a way for you to say, God, I trust you. And you are the owner. Some of you remember from time to time before the offering, I would encourage you all to take out your wallets or your purse and wherever it is you keep your money. And some of you remember I had you hand it to the family next to you, and you had to switch. Yeah, I was going to do that this morning. Take out your wallets and pass it to somebody that you don't know, and then we're going to take the offering. And I would say, give freely. And you all laugh, because you know what? It's easy to give somebody else's money, something you don't own. But you know what is true? Do I own what's in this wallet? Yeah, who does? God does. So why don't I give more freely? It's his money. It's what he has blessed us with. So I'm not going to have you switch wallets today. But I hope you get the point that giving is a joy. And I got to tell you, for Lisa and I, I remember when we were first married, we were dirt poor. To even think about tithing was like, are you sure, Lord, about this? I mean, we were making such piddly little incomes teaching at a Christian school. Sorry if any of you were teaching at a Christian school, but I mean, we started out with making, less than 5 figures. Okay? We were making 4 figures each and having to work in the summer to supplement. And we committed, because I was always raised that you need to tithe, the first 10% you tithe. And you know what? God has never let us down. God has never let us down. I mean, we've had some months where we were down to the last $100 in our checking account, and we're looking at bills coming in, and then all of a sudden God would supply in miraculous ways. My dad used to always say, you can never outgive God. And he used to always say, son, I've never seen a U-Haul behind a hearse. You can't take it with you. So be faithful to him, and he will be faithful to you. And I know it's been amazing to watch God's work in our life. And now, God's blessed us to the point where we are able to give extra, and we do. And we do it with joy, not out of obligation. So I encourage you with this little family talk to be praying, most importantly, about what God would want you to do in response. If you can be here Friday night at 6 for the dinner and for the budget presentation, for the vote on that budget, we'd encourage you to be here, even if you're not a member. Okay, some of you are new attenders or been here a while but never became members. That's fine. Come out. You're still part of the family. Okay, and you're welcome to be a part of seeing what God is going to do. I think, with all my heart, that this year is a crucial year for this ministry. I don't know why God's put that on my heart, but I believe 2015 is like a really important year for First Baptist Church, one way or the other. I know what way I want to see it go. How about you? Let's pray. Father,